is because of the work that you did and the work that some of you continue to do if you are still active duty or reservist or anything else. So I thought for a while about what I wanted to talk about today. And it's not easy to talk to veterans. It's not easy as a veteran to talk to veterans because we have so much in common, right? Like I'm an Air Force veteran. I went to the Air Force Academy. I was commissioned as an officer. So, if for those of you who are enlisted, thank you for doing all the real work, because I can attest first off that officers don't do real work. So thank you for that. But the point is, we've all been through what it's like to have to wear a uniform, and we've all been through basic training, and we've all been directed on assignments where we didn't want to go and working with people that we didn't want to work with. And I think even worse, for those of you who had a challenging time when it came time to separate, we know what it's like when the military doesn't really help us understand our own skill sets, understand our own value outside of the military. And it's a huge shortfall, in my opinion, that the military doesn't take the time. It doesn't take long. I plan on giving you in less than an hour a few hacks for how you can use your military background, your military experience, your intrinsic military abilities to just absolutely dominate in the outside world, whether you want to work for somebody or whether you want to be an entrepreneur on your own. Either way, coming from the military, coming from a veteran background is such an incredible advantage. It makes me want to slap this, like the Secretary of the Military of Defense in the face and just shake them like a little baby and say, why are you not helping veterans understand the incredible impact they could have in the outside world? But aside from me, putting threats out in the metaverse against the Secretary of Defense, let's jump into some of the stuff I want to talk about. So I mentioned that I'm a veteran. I left the Air Force in 2007 to join CIA. That was not my choice. That was something CIA tapped me on the shoulder and asked me if I'd be interested. And like any other 27-year-old single person out there, when the CIA asked me if I wanted to be part of CIA, I absolutely said yes. So that took me into my CIA career. I lived undercover. I worked undercover. I traveled the world. It was a blast. I met my wife. We had our first child. All of that was undercover. And then family caught up. And I realized that I didn't want to spend my years as a father and a husband dedicated to the CIA instead of my family. And the same thing is what took me away from the military. I realized that I wanted a family. I realized I wanted a wife, and I didn't want to ever have to pick between the military and my family. That's a sacrifice that many military members make every day. They choose to stay in uniform. They voluntarily miss birthdays and anniversaries. They deal with high stress situations that their partner doesn't understand, that their children don't understand. If maybe that's you, maybe that was you. Either way, it's a situation that I wanted to avoid. So when I had to make the hard choice to leave government service altogether, I chose to go into corporate America. Now, the reason I went into corporate America was because I believed that corporate America would be a safe place for me to find a decent paying job and kind of demonstrate my skills and gain some new skills. I thought corporate America was going to be something really interesting and cutting edge and challenging. And instead, what I found is that it was very much just like the military, right? And I don't mean to be crass or rude here, but let's face it, most people in the military are really quite lazy. Most people in the military really are just there because they didn't have any other real options. They ended up in a job category they didn't really enjoy that much, and they don't really try that hard. The government isn't there to give you challenge you and give you and encourage your ambition and encourage your creativity. They're there to basically put a body in a seat and have the seat do a job for however long your contract is. That was my experience with the military. That's the experience I've had talking to many military friends and many military peers. Some of you might be shaking your head yes and no as you agree with what I'm saying, and some of you might be shaking your head no if you disagree with what I'm saying. But my experience was that in the military, most people didn't try that hard. Most people were just kind of marking time because they were getting a decent paycheck, and it was their excuse to have, some option other than working in their local neighborhood whatever, motor pool or high school or going to community college or whatever else. So when I left and went into corporate America, I was expecting corporate America to be like a group of hardworking people. In fact, they weren't. Oh, hold on one second, folks. Somebody is allowing for closed captioning, so I'm going to say yes, even though I have no idea whether closed captioning is going to, is closed captioning going to, like, shit. I didn't know if it was going to censor me, but either way. So I go into corporate America and I'm thinking everybody's going to work hard. Everybody's going to be smart. Everybody's going to, somehow be different than what I saw in the military. And instead, what I found is that in contrast, corporate America was even lazier than what I thought saw in the military. Just think about that for a second, right? If you're agreeing with me when I talk about how people sit in seats and just kill time and stall and wait, and that's what they do. If you had that experience in the military, I need you to understand, first of all, that in corporate America, it's even worse. People in the military, you have to promote, right? You spend 3 years, 2 years, 4 years, you take a test, you bump up in grade or rank, you take on more responsibility, you go on new assignments. You have to grow. You must grow. You must grow in rank, you must grow in responsibility, you must grow in experience. In the corporate world, in the civilian world, there is no requirement to grow. So there are people who spend 12 years, 15 years, 30 years doing the same mundane task over and over again, and they justify it any number of ways. But what I'm saying is that any experience you had in the military with people not working hard or not trying their best or being lazy is magnified 5 times over when you're in the civilian world. That's a huge advantage for you. And the reason that's a huge advantage is because even if you were the person who wasn't trying that hard in your military career, even if you were the person who was skating a little bit, coasting a little bit, lazy a little bit, you're going into an environment where there are people who are already lazier and less hardworking and less creative than you ever were. So you are already one step ahead because the military forced you to grow during your time in uniform. You had to go through basic training. You had to go through your own tech school. You had to have annual performance reviews. Can you imagine? Annual performance reviews are not a regular thing in the civilian sector. They're not a common thing. There are plenty of civilian employees who go year to year not having any idea what they're doing well or what they're doing poorly. So consider your opportunity outside of uniform, whether you're brand new to being outside of uniform or whether you've been outside of uniform for a while, or if you're still in uniform considering a jump, recognize that you already know how to improve yourself. And that is something that your civilian counterparts do not know how to do. Now, does that mean I want you to go into the civilian world and continue to coast because your coasting is still a step above most civilians? No, that's not what I want you to do. What I want you to do is recognize that you are a warrior in your heart. You're a soldier in your heart. Hey, folks, I lost connection there for a second. Jamil, do you have me back, man? Hey, guys, I lost connection there for a second. Jamil or anybody in the room, can you hear me? Do you have me back? Just drop me a chat so I know.
Yeah, I've got you.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. All right, I'm just going to
I think everybody got dropped. I think it was the platform because I got dropped too, and it looks like people are coming back. You may want to give it just a minute.
So I hear Brian talking, but I think you're probably far away from me, Brian, so I can't hear you too well. Either way, Jamil, I lost connection, but I think all right, perfect. So somewhere around the time that I dropped, what I was saying is you all know how to grow. The military taught you how to grow. It gave you an advantage that the civilian world doesn't get. And second to that, all of us, we all joined the military because at some point down deep, we wanted to be warriors. That's what we wanted to do. We wanted to wear a uniform. We wanted to go and fight for our country. We wanted the challenge. We wanted the difficulty. If we didn't want the difficulty, we would have gone to community college. We would have gone and gotten a job at the fast food joint or at the mechanic shop down the street. We all had the choice to take an easier path than putting on a uniform. And we didn't choose that path. Instead, we chose a path that forced us to know that we might go in harm's way. And then once we wore that uniform, once we served in uniform, that's maybe when some of our disappointments started, when we started realizing that we're not individuals, we're not unique. We're soldiers, we're tools, we're numbers, whatever you want to call it. Now when you get back into the civilian world and you leave that military veteran world behind, I want to make sure that you take with you the best parts of your military time, because the military benefits, the military advantages that you have, they're so much more powerful in the civilian world than they ever were in the military world. And one of those advantages is that you know what it's like to say yes to becoming a warrior. Consider the fact that every adult American that you meet had the same choice. They had to face a point in their life where they asked themselves, should I join the military? Should I become a warrior? And the vast majority of them answered that question by saying no. They chose not to challenge themselves that way. They chose not to become a warrior. They chose not to put on a uniform. That was the beginning of them choosing not to grow in the way that you chose to grow. So when you go out there in the civilian world, when you're in your current job, your new job, when you're trying to network or get a job, I don't want you to hide your military background. Understand that it is a distinct advantage to you. No matter how bad, frustrating, boring, exciting, destructive your military career was, it doesn't matter. You said yes when you were asked if you wanted to be a warrior. Everyone else out there said no. So that mindset, that moment where you said yes, is a distinct advantage because it means that you are not only willing to take the risk, but you're also willing to do what other people don't do. So 3 big points that we've already covered in the military in this conversation, right? First, people are lazier in the civilian world than they ever were in the military world. It's amazing what you see in the corporate world and the civilian world when it comes to people not trying, not putting their best foot forward, and really not caring about their company, not caring about their personal growth, not caring about their business or their dreams and ambitions. It's spectacularly discouraging to see how lazy the average American is. Second, you were trained to grow. The military trained you to grow because they forced you to grow. You had to grow through basic training, through tech school, through whatever ranks that you went, whether you were officer or enlisted. You know how to grow. You were forced to do it. So many civilians out there were not. And now third, you voluntarily know what it's like to become a warrior, to say yes when other people say no. These are huge advantages in the corporate world, in the civilian world, because where other people want to quit, you don't have to quit. And it's easy to want to quit. It's easy to let yourself get distracted because when you look around the civilian world, guess what? You're surrounded by civilians. You're surrounded by people who were never warriors, never wanted to be warriors, never tried to be warriors. So it's easy to forget that you are different than them. They will quit easily. They will not step up to a challenge. They will follow groupthink. They will follow the herd. They will take the easy route over and over and over again. It's what they have always done. It's what they will continue to do. The advantage that you have is by stepping in a different direction than the way they're going, not by going in the same direction. What happens to too many veterans is we think that once we've left our time in uniform that now we have to be a civilian, and now we have to do what civilians do. The world doesn't need more civilians. What the world needs is more veterans. Veterans who are willing to understand we're not the same as civilians, and we can bring our military strengths into the civilian world. What are those military strengths? They're the same strengths that you probably thought you didn't have when you were in uniform. We have so much more discipline than the average civilian has. Even if you are not a disciplined person, you still have more discipline than the average civilian has. Understand that, take advantage of that, use that. Because if you just use a small fraction of your discipline, you're going to be light years above civilians that are out there because they don't have any discipline. You know what it's like to have something called risk tolerance. You know what it's like to take risks, not knowing how it's going to turn out, whether it's a career risk, whether it's a job risk, whatever it might be, whether it's a risk of going to a new place or a risk of having a new roommate. You know what it's like to take risks and deal with it. Just grin and bear it, right? Because that's what everybody who's taken a cold shower in the military, eaten an MRE, or gone on a hike carrying a friggin' a mock M1 or a mock M16, you know exactly what it's like to not want to do something, but do it anyways, just because you have to. Civilians don't know what that's like. So when their boss tells them something they don't want to hear, when their customer tells them something they don't want to hear, they don't know how to just push through it. They don't know how to deal with it and take the risk of just of working forward instead of running away. They don't know how to do it. You do. If you take your discipline, you take your risk tolerance, you take the fact that you know how to grow, you were trained to grow, you're familiar with growth, you're not afraid of growth. Take those things and you will have an unbelievable advantage over everybody else in the workplace. Let me just tell you a little bit about what happened for me in my story. So when I left the military and I left my time at CIA and I completely left government service behind, I was hired at a firm, at a company called CVS Health. Now, CVS Health is, yes, the same CVS pharmacy that you have on every city block in, I think, 48 states. CVS's mission was to basically be within 5 miles of every American in the continental United States. And I think that they're like 95% of the way there. I think there's only a few cities where they don't currently exist, and only 1, maybe 2 states where they don't currently exist. So CVS Health, CVS is a big firm. I was not on the retail pharmacy side. That's what the stores are called, retail pharmacy. I was in the back corporate offices in an area called Pharmaceutical Benefits Management, PBM. What does PBM mean? It means a lot of things, but to make it simple, I want you to think CVS makes a lot of money. They're a Fortune 7 company. They're the 7th wealthiest company in the United States. That means they make a shit ton of money. I was in the back end of their PBM. Their PBM is basically the part of the business. There's 5 parts to CVS's business. One part is the pharmacies that you see in every street around, or every city in America. Another part is the PBM. The PBM is what's known as the cash cow. It's the part of the business that's so wildly profitable, so wildly successful, that it basically pays for the other 4 areas of the business. That's what the PBM was. I was hired into the PBM not because I had any experience with pharmaceuticals. I didn't. I was hired into the PBM not because I had any background in tech. I don't, and all they do is tech. I was hired into the PBM not because I knew how to manage people who had competing priorities in a commercial context. I didn't. I knew how to manage warriors, and I knew how to manage operations that were clandestinely executed overseas against bad guys. Everybody knew I had 0 corporate experience, but they hired me into the PBM anyways because all they wanted was somebody who was willing to stick to a very challenging and difficult growth period in the company. For those of you not familiar with business, when a business gets larger than, say, $50 million a year, it can't grow the same way that it grew in the first $50 million. It has to grow through something called mergers and acquisitions. That means they go out and they buy other companies. They buy other companies, they pull them into their company, and they force the companies to work together. CVS was growing that way, only it wasn't buying $10 million and $20 million companies. It was buying like $170 million companies and then forcing the employees to work together. That caused a lot of conflict. That meant there were a lot of lazy people who did not want to change, who did not like change, who were now being forced to change. So because of that, CVS was having a hard time finding a manager who would stay in the role, because all that person did all day long was listen to bitching and whining and finger pointing. So when I came along, I had no technical skills, I had no managerial experience, but what I did know how to do was take a beating. I knew how to take a beating because that's all the military is. That's all your veteran life or all of your active duty life is. It's just taking a beating. Somebody telling you when you can and can't take vacation, somebody telling you what holidays you have to miss, someone telling you what shithole of the world you have to go live in a tent in for a while. That's all it is. You just know how to take a beating. You know how to just put your head down, get pummeled a little bit, and stick around for more, right? Not something the civilian world knows how to do. So I said yes to the job. I got put into the job and I just started taking my beating. Now, here's what I found was interesting. Everything that CVS needed to do, everything that they were horrible, terrible at doing, was a basic military skill that simply had not been adopted in the civilian world. People didn't show up when they were supposed to show up, not to meetings, not to conferences, not even to like review their own performance or have a conversation. When there were people in the civilian world who would say they want to talk on Tuesday at 2, who Tuesday at 2 o'clock, they were nowhere to be found, right? So people just couldn't do the thing they said they would do. And they most certainly couldn't do the thing they were told to do. So that's pretty simple, right? That's pretty simple discipline, just showing up when you're supposed to show up. So that was one of the first areas that I focused on in my team. I basically made it so that you had to show up when you said you were going to show up, or when you were told to show up, and we would do actual no shit accountability roll calls, just like you and I did in basic training throughout the military. You know, I would pull out the roster, 15 people on the team. Jane, are you here? Yes, I'm here. Bill, are you here? Yes, I'm here. Barry, are you here? Yes, I'm here. And we started enforcing the roll call with firing. My supervisor didn't like that idea at first, but then I told them very quickly that if we could execute firings, then people would start to show up. You know what? We know what it's like in the military, that you won't get fired when you don't show up, but what you will get is a demerit. What you will get is having your freedoms taken away. You'll lose your vacation weekends. You'll run into issues. There was always a consequence in the military. There was no consequence in the civilian world. It's actually very difficult to fire even somebody in the civilian world. So what I wanted to do was start building a record that was specifically pointing towards why we would terminate this person. Now, my situation was a little bit unique because the company was growing. It was growing so fast that it always had a surplus of employees. Part of my job was to identify the high-performing employees from the low-performing employees. Problem was, I was sitting there with 15 low-performing employees. Everybody was a low performer compared to the standard that you and I are used to seeing in the military. They couldn't show up to meetings on time, as a basic example. So we started enforcing simple roll call. People start showing up. We start implementing communication changes so that people can speak clearly and directly to each other instead of having to rely on email or text messages or whatever else. Again, you know what this is like. This is simple stuff to you because you sat there in uniform next to the people that you were working with and you had to have conversations. Believe it or not, in the corporate world, people will avoid confrontation, they'll avoid disagreement, they'll avoid the most simple adult tasks that you and I are very comfortable with. So I started implementing changes that would change the way that we communicate. And then, of course, I also implemented changes that changed the way that we actually executed our operations to execute them a little bit more efficiently, a little bit more with an operational lens, again, like what we do in the military. Not rocket science. My point is, nothing I did was revolutionary. All I did was go back to basics, back to my veteran roots, and implement some simple changes, not even military changes, just some simple responsibility changes. Those skills, discipline, follow through, communication, those are skills that you already have. Naturally, skills that you have from your time in uniform. Those are skills that are going to absolutely set you apart if you choose to use them in the civilian world. Don't follow what civilians do. Intentionally do something different. Intentionally bring your time uniform, your experience in uniform, bring that into your current world, whether it's part-time, full-time civilian, reservist, whatever it might be. Bring it into that world, lean into it, lean on it, leverage it, because you are immediately going to show that you are different from the pack. You're going to show that you're different from all the bobbleheads out there who, when they had a chance to wear a uniform, they said, no, I don't think all people are equal. I don't. It's objectively false. People are not equal. Some people say yes to serving the armed forces. Some people say no. Right away, they're not equal. They don't have the same level of experience. They don't have the same level of risk tolerance. They don't have the same level of discipline. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it and try and pretend that we are equal. When it comes to using the veteran skills that you have, the military skills that you are distinctly advantaged over everybody else. So use it. What does that mean? How do you use the skills that you have? There's a couple of points here that I really want you to understand. First, you know what worked for you in the military, whether it was waking up and working out, or whether it was having a routine, whether it was wearing the same uniform every day, whatever it was, you knew what worked for you. Bring that back. Nobody's there to enforce it right now. Nobody's telling you what to do. Nobody's telling you what time to wake up. Nobody's forcing you to do PT. But you know for yourself what worked well for you. What were the things that they forced you to do that did work? Whether it was eating breakfast every day, or whether it was running 3 miles in combat boots. I don't know. But the thing that worked for you, you have the choice to bring it back. If you do the things that work for you, you're going to set yourself up for success each day. You're going to set yourself up for better sleep. You're going to set yourself up for better focus. You're going to set yourself up for better productivity. If what you have let yourself do is get away from the things that set you up for success, you're already disadvantaging yourself. If you stopped working out, but you know that you liked working out, you need to get back into it. If you started drinking more beer than water, get back to more water than beer. If you started finding yourself staying up until 2 o'clock in the morning because you're zoned out on YouTube or whatever else, get back to your lights out at 10 o'clock, just like we did when we were active duty. Get back to those points because you know they work for you. Your civilian counterparts have never been in a position where they know something works. They don't know how to optimize their own energy. They don't know how to optimize their sleep. They don't know how to optimize their focus. You do. Get yourself back to what you know works, and then use your discipline to keep it going, because I know you have discipline. Even if you hate it, even if you don't like it, even if it's not comfortable, I know you know how to do it. They don't know how to do it. You have been trained. The civilians out there are untrained. That training is a huge advantage. So do what you know works for you. That's the first thing I want you to start doing right away. Second, I want you to start using your discipline to keep yourself on that winning streak. And then the third thing I want you to do is I want you to stop saying no. Just stop saying no. Every civilian out there says no all the time. They said no when they were asked if they were going to wear a uniform. They said no when they asked if they were willing to die for their country. They're going to keep saying no. They're going to say no to the big jobs. They're going to say no to the big challenges. They're going to say no to conflict. They're going to say no to criticism. They're going to say no to everything. Learn how to be the one that says yes. Be the one that says yes. Be the disciplined one. Be the optimized one, and you will have unlimited opportunities moving forward. When I started working for CBS, it was 2014. I was making $80,000 a year as a senior analyst in a department that was a total train wreck. 4 years later, I left CBS to start my own business. I was making $150,000 a year. I went from $80,000 a year to $150,000 a year in 4 years. Now, that's with no technical skills. You all have technical skills. That's with no background in management. Many of you probably have a background in management. Right? I nearly doubled my salary in 4 years, not because I learned anything new, I got any kind of certification, I did anything special. It was just because I said yes when everybody else was saying no. I used discipline to get my little department back on track, and I turned my little department of chaos into a smaller department of extremely high-performing people. I started with 15, I ended with 5. I had 5 people doing the work of 15, and they did it gracefully, and they did it skilled, and they made such a high impact that they increased the overall efficiency and the revenue that the company was bringing in. It was a fantastic time to be in corporate America. But what really made it fantastic is that I was a veteran in corporate America. So I'm telling you this because I don't know where your journey is going. I don't know what you're trying to accomplish. But if you're working outside of uniform and you have somebody else paying you for your work, they are going to love when you are the one that uses discipline and optimization and stops saying no. Because every other asshole around them, every other Tom, Dick, and fuck all who sits in your office, they are not optimized, they are not disciplined, and they are saying no every chance they get. So if you can separate yourself from that person, you're going to have an incredibly different future ahead of you than anything you would have had you stayed in uniform. You'll make more money, have more impact, have more success. Get out there, be the one that says yes, be the warrior you know you are, because when the chance came, you were the one that said yes to wearing the uniform in the first place. Jamil, that's all I've got to say. I'm happy to take questions if anybody has questions. And it was really cool to literally watch the stands kind of start to fill up with people. That was a really awesome treat. Yeah, absolutely. So assessments are what assessments are, right? They're always changing. They're always dynamic. So there are certain things that haven't changed. And I know that what my position on Russia is not the popular position inside the United States, but at the same time, I don't really care. Russia is winning. Russia's winning in Ukraine. There's no way to argue that Russia is not winning. If you're trying to argue that Russia is winning, what you're actually arguing about is momentum. The Ukrainians have gained a great deal of momentum. But here's the thing. If we were watching a Saturday or a Sunday or a Monday football game, right? If one team scored 16 points, you would say that team is winning. If the other team came back and scored 7 points, who's winning? Still the team with more points. So Russia is still in control of 18% of Ukraine. Russia still has the ability to create their own industrial military machinery in their country. Ukraine does not have that capability. Russia still has the long-term support of their partners in China, in India, and in the other, what's the other, China, India, and Brazil in the BRIC trading bloc. Ukraine is constantly having to ask for more support from NATO and from the West. So you can start to see over time, this is not an even matchup. If NATO or the West pulls back any level of support from Ukraine, it's going to be exponentially beneficial to Russia. And with a change in the House that we just saw in the 2022 elections, with the winter approaching and prices for basic survival needs in Poland, in Germany, in the UK, in France skyrocketing, you're going to see things change. Things have to change. And that's going to exponentially disadvantage Ukraine. Now, not only do you see the changing tide of resources, but you also see the US putting pressure on Zelensky to start opening negotiations, when just a few weeks ago, he was adamantly refusing negotiations unless there was a new president in Russia and unless Russia retreated all the way back to its original 1997 borders. Those are two, I mean, to go from demanding a full withdrawal and a return to essentially immediately after the fall of the Soviet Union, to go back to those two requirements and say that it's not negotiable unless those are entertained, a tap on the shoulder from President Biden is all it took for Zelensky to say, actually, you know what, we will consider negotiations under certain conditions with Russia. That does not show me, that's not, when you have leverage in a negotiation, you don't change your position. It shows, it demonstrates just how little negotiating power Ukraine really has in this conversation. Because, again, the conflict is not between Ukraine and Russia. The conflict is absolutely a proxy war, just like Yemen, just like Syria, just like Libya. It's a proxy war between the United States and Russia being played out in Ukraine. So Jamil, again, I know that's not a popular opinion. I know that there's tons of people out there who disagree with me. If anybody hasn't seen my Twitter feed for the last like 3 months, then you don't like just go check it out and you'll see exactly how many people hate everything I'm saying. But what I want to say is that is absolutely how I see it strategically through the cold-hearted eyes of a veteran and a former intelligence officer. It's all right, man. I've seen this happen many a time in live situations, so it's totally okay with me. Yeah, it's I really appreciate the fact that you all have a theme around supporting our own, right? Homeless veterans is a sad thing. Suicidal veterans is a sad thing. Veterans who are suffering from trauma and veterans who are turning to alcohol or drug abuse, it's all sad. And to me, it's all demonstrative of the sacrifice that veterans make that the average person doesn't make. So why am I saying all that? I'm saying that because picking one of those causes is a viable way of trying to make an impact. And homelessness is an awesome place to start. The national security impact of homeless veterans is not as significant as it sometimes gets trumped up to be. If it was a true national security concern, you would see more interest coming from the government. You'd see more interest from FBI. You'd see more interest from CIA. You'd see more interest from local police. I think the bigger problem isn't necessarily what's the national security impact of homeless vets. The bigger impact is what is the message that we're sending future recruits when we have so many veterans that are homeless. Now, I understand that we've seen a 50% improvement. Like we've seen almost half of homelessness among veterans drop since 2015. And that's a really encouraging statistic. That still means that there's 40,000 some homeless veterans that live without a roof over their heads. That's totally insane to me. That's completely unacceptable. However, the bigger, scarier message is right now we're also going through a military recruiting crisis. The military has decreased their standards for enlistment, and still they're missing their enlistment goals by 10,000 or more per quarter. I wonder how much of our current issue is tied to the fact that people have watched America disrespect and dishonor their veterans since the Vietnam War. So what I really see as valuable and impactful about the work that you guys are doing here in a hackathon designed to support, to help the homeless veterans that are out there, is that we're changing the narrative. We're changing this idea that cares about our veterans, and we're changing it to show that veterans care for their own, right? That's the true family that we have. We watch out for our own. There's nothing I wouldn't do to help another veteran get a better job, start their business, make more money. It's what we do for each other. It's how veterans work. And when you see veterans supporting other veterans, I feel like that changes the theme about whether or not our country will care for us. We all know the VA doesn't do as good a job as they could do. We all know that people have mixed feelings about those who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's a shame. It's a shame that you went out there and served your country, and now there are people who think that you were part of the problem. But for those of us who have served in uniform, we also know that there is no better way to honor our brothers and sisters. also in uniform than by doing what we can to help them. And that's what I think is really going to be powerful in the long term when it comes to helping homeless vets, helping traumatized vets, and helping vets that have succumbed to some kind of abusive behavior, whether it's alcohol, drugs, or otherwise.
Yeah, great speech and a great talk. I really love the information. I thought it was fantastic and really learned a lot. I recently read Reed Hastings' book, No Rules Rules, about his approach to leadership at Netflix. I hear a lot of the hardline approach, like leading with the stick at CVS. But I'm wondering, I don't know if you've read the book or not, but if you have, like, how do you feel that your approach to leadership compares, contrasts, differs, overlaps? And then, like, at what point at your time at CVS did you maybe switch from leading with a stick to leading with a carrot?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I have not read the book, but I totally appreciate the whole idea of leading with a stick versus leading with a carrot. So here's my answer is this, right? Leaders in the military are not the same as leaders outside of the military, right? Leaders in the military, you have a workforce that works with you because they have to. So you can essentially be as strict or as disciplined as you want to be because they have to work there. They don't really get a chance to go somewhere else. So nobody has choices in the military. We just do what we have to do. In the civilian sector, you're exactly right. People always have a choice. They have a choice to stay. They have a choice to leave. They also have a choice to complain or file HR clauses or disputes against you. Like, there's a multitude of things they can do. But the ultimate thing to understand is that when you're in the civilian world, you don't work for your employees. You work for the people above you. And the people above you work for the people above them. And ultimately, everybody works for the shareholder or the owner or the person making the investment. So why do I say that? I say that because you can't be afraid to use the stick. You have to use the stick. In a lot of ways, unless you at least show people the stick, you're always going to have a room full of cowards. So show the stick and the cowards will run away. And when the cowards run away, then you actually have a dense population of people who are not cowards. They're not afraid when you show a little bit of backbone. They're not afraid when you show a little bit of grit, because guess what? Those people carry grit and backbone themselves. So when you have weeded down the herd, then you can put the stick away and bring out the carrot. Because here's what you know, everybody in there is incentivized by the same kind of thing when you have a hardworking, dense population of high achievers. When you have a mixed population of high achievers and cowards, you don't really know what motivates them as a group. I mean, some of the people are there just because they're looking for a way to waste time. Some people are there because they're trying to get shit done. You have to get the people who are going to waste time out of the way before you can truly motivate the people who want to work hard. Not only that, but if you've ever been on a high working team, Drew, you know what happens when you bring high working people together and you give them a small group of people who have a similar passion, a similar calling, a similar vision. They work even harder. But if you bring that same group together and you have a little bit of fat on the sides and you have a couple of naysayers and a couple of people who are lazy and people who don't really work that hard, the whole dynamic changes. And now all of a sudden, even your high achievers perform at a lower level. So my answer to your question is, there's absolutely a point when carrot matters more than stick, but you have to use the stick first, especially if you're coming into a team where you see the lack of discipline, you see the lack of performance. Just imagine how much more powerful everything would be if the first news anybody shared was the hard news. If the first thing everybody said was the shittiest, hardest part, just imagine you'd see half of the people leave right away, which means that the half that's still left, the half that still remains, is going to be that much more in line with what you're trying to achieve.
That's great. Thank you.
Hey, Andrew. I have a question. Yeah, I know you said you started in business and such, and I just want to hear more about it. How did you bootstrap your business, and what idea, how did you go through the process of generating a business idea, and if you use like VA benefits and such from being in the Air Force. But yeah, I would just like to hear more about that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So, John, I'll make it kind of short. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in the chat right now, folks. If you don't know what my business is, I'm just going to give you a real quick link that I built just for veterans anyway, so it kind of makes sense. But this is a real simple. This is a link that takes you to one of the types of things that I create. It's just a free report where I'm teaching veterans how to use your own veteran skills. It's similar but different from what I talked about today. To answer your question, when I decided to go into business for myself, the reason I did it was because I saw how the skills that I learned in the military, as simple and silly as they were, I saw how they significantly changed my company's success rate when I applied them to my company, to the company I worked for, right? And then I did the same thing with my CIA skills. I took things like social engineering and positive thinking and self-discipline to a new level, and I applied them through my CIA skills. I applied that to CBS as well, and we had another massive evolution of success. So once I started seeing that I could essentially almost guarantee success just by bringing in a few military skills and a few CIA skills, that gave me the confidence I needed to basically step out of my company on my own and go start my own business. Now, what does it look like to start your own business? So the first thing is most people start a business the wrong way. They start a business by doing something they are passionate about or they care about. If you want a functioning business, you should never build a business about something you care about and that you want. You're supposed to always consider, what does the customer want? You'll often find that what you want and what the customer wants are not that different in reality, but they're very different in terms of success and making sales and generating cash flow and having this success bootstrapping a business. So take whatever you're passionate about. If you're passionate about coding, if you're passionate about games, if you're passionate about app development or whatever else, take the thing you care about and then ask yourself, why does this thing matter to somebody who's going to buy it in the future? If you want to develop apps, then you want to then create an app that solves a problem that buyers have. It's instead of creating an app that does something you think would be whiz bang cool, create an app that solves a current need. You'll always be able to build your whiz bang cool app later on, after you have the cash flow and the money and everything else that's going to come from the very practical, tactical decision of spending your time and talent creating something that people need. I hope that makes sense. Because without cash flow, without a product that people want, you don't have any hope of having a successful business. That's the reason 4 out of 5 businesses fail. It's because most business owners actually start a business doing something they care about, something they want to do, and they never think about the customer. So then they take the loan, they get the shop, they buy the stock, they do the work, and nobody buys it. And when nobody buys it, you don't have cash flow. And if you don't have cash flow, you don't have a working business. So the most important thing that I can share, John, about starting your own business is, if you're thinking about it, if you're an entrepreneur at heart, don't doubt it. It's in you. There are so many people who don't ever want to be entrepreneurs. Trust me when I tell you that if you're thinking like an entrepreneur already, it is something that you want to do. So take a chance and keep building your idea in your head. But when you go to actually execute, do not execute without thinking about, what is the customer going to buy. When you have buying customers, you have lots of cash flow. When you have lots of cash flow, you essentially have room to make mistakes, and that's a good thing. But when you don't have customers, you don't have cash flow, you don't have room to make a mistake, and that's when your business dies.
Thank you.
Yeah, John, that was a huge question, man. So I know I probably didn't do it justice, but I just wanted to get something across while I could.
No, I appreciate it. And yeah, it gives me things to think about, and it's just a foundation. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of research needed to continue to keep growing ideas and such. But Yeah, that was great.
Awesome. Okay. I can't wait to see how these turn out, man. This is wild. Thanks, man. I appreciate it, and keep on doing what you're all doing. Like it's awesome work, and keep keep that veteran hard work alive, guys. See you, man.